Okay,
Okay.
sounds good. Okay, thanks. Okay, well, I think what we'll do is go ahead and get started. Terry Shelton, as we speak, is up swatting mosquitoes on the boundary waters. So he's not able to join us today. And Kurt Sippel is in Guatemala working on a project there. So we'll go ahead with what we've got here. And just a reminder that this is our last session for this. So after this, we'll no longer be meeting on our Tuesday mornings. So, and this morning, we're meeting with Rolf Wegenke. Rolf is the president and CEO of the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges. It's an association of 23 private colleges throughout the state. And he'll talk to us more about that, I'm sure. Rolf has served served 5 governors, beginning with Governor Pat Lucey. And he is currently the chair of the Wisconsin Public Broadcasting Foundation, and also he's on the Wisconsin Education Communication Board. And he is looking forward to retirement in what, a couple of months, right?
Yes, August.
In August, okay. All right. So Rolf, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. It's been years since I've had a chance to speak with this group. And last time I spoke, it was in a small room in downtown Madison with just a few people. Now technology looks like we're in different rooms, but a few people, but it's interesting to look forward to. I am retiring from WAICU or WAICU. We're very ecumenical about how you pronounce the acronym. But it is, and that does stand for the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. WAICU is the official organization of Wisconsin's 23 private nonprofit colleges and their 53,000 students. When I say official, that does not mean we're a governmental agency. Although the association is in state statute, because we are performing certain functions which in other states are performed by a state agency. For example, supplying data to 2 federal data systems that are mandated by federal law, but we don't have an agency to ship that out, so we collect and distribute the data for the state of Wisconsin. I would say without compensation of any sort. So it becomes an unfunded mandate, but seriously, we're happy to perform that service. WAICU was organized in 1961, but it is a 501c3. Our mission statement is working together for educational opportunity. We take that very seriously. Everything we do in this organization is aimed at increasing educational opportunity, particularly for low income and students of color. That is most shown, I think, in our support for governmental and private financial aid, again, for low income students and students of color. We administer on the private side foundation, which is aimed solely at providing aid to those students. WAICU is, as I said, an association. It is not a system, although frequently when I'm on a panel with the president of the UW system and the president of the technical college system, they will say, and here's the person from the WAICU system. We've tried to train people to say sector, thinking that would help. It doesn't. So we've decided just not to make a fuss. We are, as Dennis said, very involved in the community. A recent one is there's a newly created state board called the Distance Learning Authorization Board. And that calls for the president of WAICU, the president of the UW system, the president of the Tech College system to actually be the board members. And we rotate among the 3 of us, the chair of that. And that relates to reciprocity agreements for distance learning programs. And as with all of this, I'm happy to, at the end here, answer questions if you have any about that. Everyone, when they talk about higher education, talks about their economic impact. I'm personally a skeptic of the value of that, is that we were created to influence the economy. The fact of it is we do have a considerable and positive impact on the economy, but it's not why we exist. Our latest impact statement shows we have a $7.1 billion annual economic impact, and we directly and indirectly support 62,825 jobs. And we also generate, and it's complex how we measure this, but 1.3 billion in tax revenue for the state and federal governments. As I said, we have 53,000 students, but our contribution to particularly critical occupations in this state at a time of worker shortage is disproportionate. And I'll try and explain what I mean. We meaning WAICU or WAICU, produce 23% of the bachelor's degrees and 30, I have to get this right, 35% of the advanced degrees in this state. But despite that, when you look at bachelor's degrees, we produce 24% of the business graduates, 27% of the engineering graduates, and 53% of the nursing graduates. So disproportionate to our undergraduate enrollment. With advanced degrees, where we have 35% of advanced degrees, that's 43% of the business degrees, 43% of the pharmacy degrees, 45% of the advanced degrees for educators, 60% of the medical doctors, which means basically the Medical College of Wisconsin at its 3 campuses around the state, one in De Pere, one in Milwaukee, and one in Wausau. And 100% of the dentists, and that means Marquette University, which has the state's only dental school. When you look at our mission and how this relates to enrollment, 30% of our students are classified as low-income students, and that is in turn defined as Pell eligible, and that compares to 23% of the students at the UW system who are counted as low income. The students of color, WAICU, 28% of the WAICU enrollment are students of color, and 19% at the UW system. I raise that not because it's a competition, but because we all feel we can do more, and it's important to have data underlying how are we doing so far. And we're encouraging, we hope, each other to make more opportunity available, both in the public and in the private sector. And one thing in which we agree in the legislative thing is support from both the public systems and from WAICU for the Wisconsin Grant Program, which the Wisconsin Grants are the state's #1 financial aid program for low-income students. There is, of course, more than the state grant program. As I said before, we provide private aid to our students. As a matter of fact, I can't read my own handwriting. I'm waiting for eye surgery, so bear with me here. And later on, give me encouragement if you've had looking at cataract surgery. The average student tuition at WAICU members is $34,860, which undoubtedly makes you say, how can they have such a large percentage of low-income students? That's the average tuition list sticker price, but the average grant package is $30,624. Now, if you're good at math, you already know that that means the net tuition or net out-of-pocket cost for our students is $4,236. So $34,000 in student aid, $30,000 in round numbers here $34,000 sticker price, and then 30-some thousand in grant aid, leaving a net tuition of $4,236. 70% of the grant aid provided to our students in the WAICU membership is privately raised. It's from the colleges and universities themselves. So we're not saying to the state with Wisconsin grants, we're not saying to the federal government with Pell grants, you do it. We're stepping up ourselves and raising and allocating that private money because it's part of our mission. We are here, we're glad we provide economic impact, but we are here to provide opportunity for those who have frankly had precious little opportunity. The degrees and counting degrees and graduation is important, as I said, especially in critical occupations. But there are other things that are important that from an education, important outcomes that we also strive to reach. And that is what I call the 5 C's: creativity, communication, collaboration, or working in a team, and character. Those 5 things are harder to measure, but equally important with creating job opportunities for our students. We're proud of that. It's an interesting thing, though, as you look at the 5 C's and how they're reacted. Those 5 C's are identified by CEOs of major employers really around the country. That work was done by Georgetown University. But if you survey HR offices, personnel offices, they will say that job skills are number 1 and they don't really care. So one of our educational missions, we feel, is to educate CEOs and HR people on what employers want. And of course, they want skills, but they again want critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, and character in people they hire. So that's one educational function I think we can all perform. Another area where we need more education, and I would argue, and then I'm going to turn over to you for questions, is we need a response to those who are saying you don't really need college. People who say that often feel it is those others. Those people don't need college. My children need college. And the outcomes, I think, are significant, but I think it's also, when you look at enrollment trends, enough people have said that enough time that it's starting to bear fruit, and it's not good for the state. It's not good for those students to be told college matters in many ways. It's certainly in income and students, for example, 6% of low-income students complete the FAFSA when they're applying. But then those low-income students who do have 127% better chance of actually enrolling in college. So it's nothing to be proud of if we have that many students not applying. And we have to look at ourselves and how many times we have said, you don't need college, or we have too many people going to college when we have enrollment challenges right there. It's certainly not true. There are great needs, shortages in educators and teachers. There are shortages in engineers, in medical doctors, particularly family practice and psychiatry. And those are all places that need degrees. It is not an anti-skills or vocational education proposition when you say we need more college degrees. Everything works together. There is a major employer in Wisconsin who employs thousands of people on the factory floor, but employs 500 chemists and lawyers and marketing specialists who are not on the shop floor, but both segments of our economy need each other to succeed. If you're in marketing, you need that product which is manufactured. If you're manufacturing, you need engineers to fix developmental problems that you found. But we have gotten ourselves into a narrow-minded way of understanding education and understanding the importance of opportunities. So I think we all have to speak up. It isn't, unfortunately, just a narrow group of our elected officials. It's generally out there. You can turn it on television. You can hear people saying, those people should not be going to college. And I hope if you take anything home from what I have to say today, I'd hope you certainly would know more about private colleges in the state, but I hope you would also think of what we're doing by downplaying the importance of higher education. One last thing, I'm going to circle back because I would be in trouble with my staff if I didn't. WAICU is actually better known nationally than it is in Wisconsin, and we are known for what we call collaborative services. So for our 23 private colleges, we go together and provide money-saving programs for them. We have 45 such programs now, and we have saved collectively over the last years $240 million that we can document for our members. So we manage for some of them, not all of them, their retirement system. We manage their purchasing, as I said. We manage some people's health plans. We provide training for department chairs and division chairs. So it's a variety of services that are behind the scenes, I guess. They're important to our members, saving tens of millions of dollars, but we're not known for that. The congressional report on the college cost crisis, as a matter of fact, said WAICU's cost-saving collaborations were transformative. So I'm proud of that. And as I retire, I'll still be talking that up, and so will my staff and my successor. So that's an overview of the private colleges in Wisconsin. If I could prevent you all from checking your screens, I'd run a contest and see if you could name all 23. But I don't think it's quite fair in this case. But I'd be happy to answer questions or try to answer questions and hear your perspectives as well.
Okay, thanks very much. And let me just invite people to unmute themselves and ask questions that you've got, or share observations. And let me just start out by asking, how did this association get started? Was it in response to a particular crisis? Was it a group of, you said that there's some statutory reference. Was it a sense that we needed the shared services that you were referring to? What was the start?
It had a mixed history. It's 60 years old, and I've been here 30 for half of it. So part of the history I have to lay claim for. But when it started in 1961, it started with a group of college presidents who wanted to get together and share scholarship. So it started with an academic interest. However, there were complaints from the business community, in part, that we were all asking for money. And we do, because we're not supported by the taxpayers in this state. In some states, private college, New York is an example, private colleges are supported by state taxpayers. This organization is not. But so they said they were, didn't want all these presidents coming with their handout and saying, fund this scholarship and fund this internship, which we still do. So they said, maybe you could form an organization and make a common request. And that purpose, although it was in there, frankly, it didn't work. People weren't interested in giving to an abstraction called private colleges. People wanted to give, for example, an internship for people who were working in psychiatry or studying psychiatry. They had a specific thing they cared about, and sort of the generic give to this organization, it never worked. So everyone is in it for themselves, in the sense that they're out and looking for funding, but they're focused on what the cause is. So that's what started it up. But then in 2000, when I was hired, actually, the presidents who are the board of directors of WAICU said, would you please, when this is at the offer stage, do something about college costs? And I thought, great. Now that's a little bigger agenda than I anticipated. And but over time, we had support from the Teagle Foundation to do a feasibility study. And we had startup costs funded by actually the federal government. And so we've been off seriously in this since 2002 in our cost-saving ventures, but they're all voluntary. We devise an opportunity. Let's take a simple one like office supplies. And we have a higher rebates than any college can get on its own. But no college in my membership is obligated to use that office supplies program. So we have to be, as an association, persuasive that say you don't have to, but here it is, ready to go, because no one wants to sign up and if there's nothing there yet and then wait for you to organize it. So we have to organize in advance, not knowing if anyone will participate. So it's a challenging role and a complex one. We recently, fairly recently, organized a multi-employer retirement plan where we do the administrative side for a number of our colleges. I think it's 8 now. It's not everybody. We can't require that either. But it's the complex and the big expense things that we're looking at. So that's the history. It's changed over time, and the addition of responsibilities to the state started to come in really the early 2000s when the state said we're looking for volunteers to do data collection that the federal government was mandating. And so we said, yes, we would.
I see. There was a time, as I recall, and I haven't heard anything recently, but I was thinking about, for example, Edgewood here in Madison, where there was a discussion about whether or not it was going to be able to survive financially. Is that indeed an ongoing concern about the private colleges?
It always is. I mean, I think that as long as I've been here, people have been saying, and I'm not going to listen because it perpetuates that college is going to close. And not that none had. The last one was probably Mount Scenario in 2002. But it's hard for people to understand. One of the reasons people say that we're going to close is we give so much student financial aid. As I said, 70% of the grant aid comes from the college itself. That's privately raised. And people who aren't familiar where it goes, I mean, it goes to the students who are our students. And so there's a sort of a misunderstanding. We're having all this outlay, and it is significant outlay. But in general, I can think of 2 very well-known colleges that people have told me with great authority they're going to close, and here 30 years later they're still prospering. Part of it is the federal government has a system where they judge whether or not the college is fiscally stable, but they don't include things like endowment. And all of my colleges administer endowments. 79% of it, in fact, is going to students or for instruction of the distribution from the endowment. But the federal criteria look at endowment as a bad thing. And so you can have your score posted by the federal government for having a growing endowment. As a matter of fact, the federal government has for the larger endowments is starting to tax endowments, which is money then that will not go to the student and not go for instruction. And it's been very frustrating, but the people in Congress who believe in that say, well, you're just building a large bank account. Endowment is not a bank account, as you know, and it isn't, certainly don't have discretion, right. But it's to fund students and as I said, instruction, or 79% of it is. But these members of Congress have gotten the Department of Education to interpret it as a wasteful slush fund. So it's the donors that support these foundations, I have to tell you, would not their money would not be there if in fact it was a slush fund. And both the donors and now the government really watch what we do with that. But it's those misunderstandings. Will no one ever close? No. I mean, as with a lot of things that are not have a guaranteed funding stream, you have to watch it. This recession, the last recession was devastating for us. We were helped by federal funds, which came in the emergency and with the pandemic, but we survived. And so I'm generally optimistic, but we're careful.
Along with this, there's as long as I can remember, people have said, oh, Wisconsin just is not a large enough state to support all of the colleges that it has. And often we'll refer to the University of Wisconsin system. I remember being on a task force to consider closing University of Wisconsin Superior.
I remember
we ended
that,
up,
yes.
okay.
I remember their state senator, particularly, his reaction to that.
Yeah, yep. And Paul Offner was a key figure there. So, and Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin, of course, has done some restructuring too, in response to this sort of notion as well. Maybe we've got more colleges and universities in the state than the state demographics can support. What is your response to that? I mean, to some extent, you've already addressed it, but.
Well, and as I did say before, I think that we clearly have shortages in critical occupations. We clearly need more college educated people. And whether it's more institutions or more students enrolled at current institutions, but there is a gap between our workforce needs and what the colleges are now producing. So I'm not persuaded that we have too many. I think you also have to look at what's in our case, particularly with the private nonprofit colleges and universities. You have to look at the fact that we are dependent on the market. If students don't find the kind of educational opportunity we make available for them, if they don't find it meeting their needs, they will go elsewhere. And we have, except for the endowment, which probably wouldn't last either. So the measure of whether or not we're needed is the fact that we're still here and we're prospering, and enrollment, thank goodness, is recovering. One related thing too with particular occupations, I think that the state could do a better job, more thoughtful job, is every time I remember the .com bubble, and everyone is supposed to major in political science. Well, that sort of collapsed and not major with it. So I think it's very dangerous if the state specifies we will give financial aid only to specific majors, and I'd rather give it to people who have need and let them pursue the career that works for them. Because there are, as I said, with the .com, you can end up with too many majors in a particular field. But there's also, when they're creating those occupational specified financial aid programs, a danger that you attract students from one college to another, whether it's one UW campus to another, or UW to a private, or a private to a private, and not actually increase the education that the state, or the educated workforce that the state needs. So there was an instance of that with looking for doctoral programs in nursing, and that was included, but it provided that a stipend and loan assistance would be only for students at UW, so doctoral students in nursing at UW. Well, what the net result of that we feared was that that would take, I have 5 of my members who have doctoral programs in nursing. It would incent them to go to UW campuses and not actually increase the number of doctoral programs in nursing, or students that we need, graduates that we need. And fortunately, Governor Evers got that pulled from the budget for the very reasons, and the reasons he specified was he thought the state needed more. If we're going to educate more nurses, we need more people to educate those nurses, and that it would do exactly what we feared. So but that's an example of, if we're going to lift all boats in the state of Wisconsin, I think we have the right number. It's a matter of applying and utilizing those right numbers for what the state needs to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the kind of the demographics of the student body, kind of generally. Do you have a lot of international students, a lot of students who come from outside Wisconsin?
It depends on the college a lot. There are some, certainly Carthage College in Kenosha, Marquette University in Milwaukee have significant numbers of students from out of state. We're looking, all of us, we have international students. We would like to have more. And again, that's in responsive to employers in the state. We simply didn't have enough babies 18 years ago. And even if we get more into college and graduating from college, we need to have more students. That gets you into federal immigration law and the restrictions that are there. But we have some, we would like more, I guess is the short answer. And if you consider that short, then you really don't know me very well, because I can go on and on and on. So cut me off.
No, you're not. Go ahead.
No, that's just fine.
Yeah. Okay. So are you advising your members to reach out more to international students, or is that really kind of a dangerous road because of the immigration laws that keep changing?
They're all doing it without my advice. I would say they are all seeking more. It is one of those things that would be complicated to do on a collaborative basis. So it's been suggested, for example, several years ago, that we take a group of our member colleges on a student prospecting visit to China. And but when you get there with that student or that group of students or that secondary school in China, then if Marquette's on it, do they go to Florence University is on this delegation? Who gets the student? And their message is different. I mean, Lawrence and Marquette are different. Milwaukee School of Engineering is even more different, if that's grammatically correct. So we decided that was one of those cases, and there are others too, where it's better if each does it on its own.
Okay. Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And let me encourage people to ask questions. Also, just go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can contribute to the conversation.
I'll throw in one more factoid in international. Wisconsin is home to the only, I believe it's the only United States campus that has a branch campus in Japan. And that's Lakeland University. And for years, there was a fad sort of to put campuses in Japan, and some major institutions, I think Columbia was one, did it, and it didn't quite work. But Lakeland has stayed in there, the little engine that could, and it's still working.
So have you drafted your farewell speech? Sort of what kind of challenges do you think you're giving your successor?
Well, I have, because we actually had the farewell celebration about a week ago, because I wanted to get out of the spotlight as much as I could for my successor. So, and that recruitment is still ongoing. We expect news in July. But so I've celebrated. Yes, I did have a speech. And one of the things that I certainly urged the presidents and my successors to be willing to take risks. And I think that's been why we're successful so far in adding those cost-saving programs, doing other things. When we first added the cost-saving programs, a CFO from one of our colleges stood up and said, "Rolf, you're just going to make everything worse." Yeah. I thought, how do you know that? You know, but I didn't say it, and she certainly changed her mind. I was also on a national panel with on our cost-saving initiatives, specifically in the technology field. And as the speakers dragged on, I was last. The moderator said, "Well, we're running out of time, and I think we all know that Rolf's project is never going to work, so we're going to skip it." And I flew to Washington and to be on this panel for no other reason. And we skipped it because we all knew it wouldn't work. I still see him occasionally at conferences. And I always like to remind him that we're saving tens of millions of dollars a year for the project that would not work. So risk-taking is one of the things I do believe in. And adhering to that mission of working together for educational opportunity. It is a cause that goes beyond sort of the mechanics of what the association does, but should color everything we do. And I think that was easy, but in practice, I'm sure it's challenging to do. But take risks and remember the mission.
Yeah, good. Ray, you've got a question or comment.
I do. Thanks, Dennis. I did put this up in a chat and sent it out to everyone because I did not want to be accused of giving a long speech of my own. So I put it there as a chat so I could write it up and have everybody have the opportunity to read it. But the short version of it, Rolf, will be, what role will you and the association play in the current political arena where people are trying to restrict education, restrict books, change curricula, refuse to deal with history, et cetera, et cetera. That to me, you as the president and WAICU as a series of institutions can play a tremendous role in keeping education open, of keeping education presented by experts and by curricular people who know what they're talking about and people who understand history, as opposed to having people who would just assume not have that level of understanding go. And this is at all levels, from kindergarten up through master's programs.
I think we are with you, and we treasure free speech and academic freedom. There have been court cases, you can look this up, I won't go into detail and refight it, but the state Supreme Court cases affecting Marquette University, which the association filed an amicus brief, defending what you just said, what the open discussion and honest discussion of ideas. And just because we're not funded by the taxpayers doesn't mean we're not part of this community. And what we do affects public institutions, what public institutions affect us. The only thing we have so far been successful in arguing is that the state legislature has no authority to play a role in our curriculum and graduation requirements and admissions requirements. As a matter of fact, there is language in state law which related to the Distance Learning Authorization Board I mentioned to you earlier. And that language says that nothing that the board does can be taken to affect curriculum, enrollment, or graduation standards. So we have it written right into the law. Of course, it's the legislature who passes that law. They could repeal it. I'm not naive. I know there are some who would love to go back and repeal it. But we started out putting a stake in the ground, if you will, that this is where we're going to stand, and it's written into state law.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing news releases coming from your office and from WAICU.
If only people would publish them. Of course, I've always believed that.
Well, Dennis is a political scientist, so he may have good words for helping us all move forward the importance of the openness of education. So I'll leave that to you also, Dennis.
Okay. Yeah, I think it is. It's a good point. We need to have respect for science and for free speech, and at all levels, let instruction occur without a political agenda or culture wars kind of coming in. Yes. That's very dangerous. So, do you want to talk a bit more, Rolf, about what you see with online learning? Are some of your members really looking to that as a way of emphasizing what they're offering in the future?
It's one of those things where everyone is doing something different, and we're supplying the technology, but not the content. I do think, though, that if we look at elementary and secondary education in particular, and somewhat I understand even at the graduate level, that online learning has not had the kinds of outcomes that everyone hoped. That actually people learned less and performed less well in various assessments after having been in online. And you look back, I think it all depends on how you use it and how you apply it. Some people obviously did learn and learn as much and did well, but a significant number did not. You look back a few years at MOOCs, everyone remembers MOOCs, I'm sure. That was supposed to end the need for a brick and mortar college, and everyone would just tune into a MOOC. MOOC provides, in general, provides information, which we all need, information, but it doesn't give you a chance to develop your critical thinking skills, the kind of things that we talked about earlier. And so that requires, it seems, the evidence is coming in, more human face-to-face interaction. It's not going away. And blended education is the term that Lakeland University again uses for them. They have online. They're one of the first in the state of Wisconsin to have a complete degree online. So they're into it, but it is blended with other kinds of experience, and for them it's working very, very well. Of course, you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt because I'm a techno klutz. And some of you may have seen my assistant in here later telling me one of the microphones with the headset was not working, and neither of us, unfortunately, could figure out how to get it working again. So,
well, you're coming through very nicely. So,
right. Whatever
the technical problems, I guess we've overcome them for this morning. Yeah. Does the association do much in terms of maintaining a certain level of standards for either admission or graduation, or is that entirely left up to the individual colleges?
It is left up to the individual, but there is a lot of, and there are a lot of differences, but there's a lot of talking back and forth. Alverno College, particularly in pioneering work that they did with assessment, is stunning. As you probably know, Alverno College offers no grades, and the assessment they do is one-to-one. They, for example, if a woman, and it's a women's college, if a woman is a finance major, that throughout the semester and throughout her 4 years at the college, at the Alverno system, is they are assessed by someone from the outside, a banker perhaps for a finance major, an investment broker, all sorts of people from outside who come in and interview the student as a way of assessing them. These are recorded on videos are made. The student then has a chance to observe that and improve and come back and be reassessed until the student will not graduate until they can demonstrate they have learned. This is a labor-intensive way to assess, but it's certainly, and you talk to anyone who's hired someone from Alverno, those women who are mostly, at least they were a few years ago, women over the age of 25, often with children, are hot properties because that kind of assessment and that sort of self-assessment really makes a difference. Others are more traditional. They have grades. The good thing is small class size with private colleges. You can run, but you can't hide. I tell students that maybe that's a bad thing to do. But our average class size is 17 students. So there's an assessment going on with the faculty and the student all the time through the learning process that maybe isn't codified, but it's still, and you talk to the students after they graduate, you do those surveys. It was that criticism in a broad sense, a criticism from a faculty member who really made the difference in their learning. But it is definitely that's a prerogative for shared governance to say how assessment is going to work, and we respect that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you having any problem with recruiting quality faculty members?
It depends on the field. Milwaukee School of Engineering is on track to become one of the largest artificial intelligence institutions of higher education in the country. They had a very generous gift from a faculty member. They have recruited, it's a new building, but there's also going to be faculty in artificial intelligence. It's been a challenge. But with everything, there's so much you can do to get around that. In other fields, it's easier to find people with doctorates. So it does depend.
And I know that you've mentioned that you don't really see yourself in a kind of competitive situation vis-a-vis the public universities. But is there a particular pitch that you would give to highlight the advantages of a private versus a public?
The pitch I always do is go and visit, and because we have an annual private college week coming up every July for 25 years, in which we encourage through high school counselors students to visit. And they get to meet with faculty. They get to meet with the financial aid director, because that net tuition figure, it's sort of unbelievable. You can get a $4,000 a year net tuition. And to explain all that, we encourage them to bring their parents. But ultimately, it is the faculty that makes the difference. And I can tell a story from my son, who went to one of our members. And I'm going to tell you who it was, because the president would tell you anyway, claims that this is my favorite. It isn't. I love them all. But anyway, he was visiting at St. Norbert College. And and he said when he registered, you could say, do you want to meet with a faculty member in what field? And here in July, he had said he wanted to meet with someone in creative writing. And off he went to meet with this faculty member. And I was sitting in the admissions office waiting for him to come back. I thought this would be 10, 15 minutes. 1 hour goes by. There's not a sign of him. And then almost another hour goes by, and I said to the admissions staff, I better go get him, this faculty. He said, don't you dare, they've connected. And that was exactly it. My son came back and said, this guy is magical. He said, and we talked about writing and the dynamics of writing, and can writing be taught? And anyway, we encourage people to visit and actually talk to a faculty member. We're open to that. And that's another thing, the advantage of being smaller. That would be very difficult, especially if you have a potential student who's going to talk for hours. And you can probably guess I am the dad here. There's obviously I'm demonstrating the family traits.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, it's great to have a connection like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Alice has got a contribution here.
Thank you. You had mentioned that the average tuition of a private school in Wisconsin is $34,000, which I actually think is low, because I've got a granddaughter going to a private college in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said that the average grant was $30,000. Was that average grant for low income, or is that the average grant for all students?
For all. So
really?
the net tuition is $4,000. The actual average tuition, let's see if I can find it here. I read my own stuff, so you'd think I'd be able to find it. The average net is $4,236 for annual tuition, and the well, it dropped. So again, my type, but it is true. I mean, these are actually federal government figures, so they lag a year. Federal government, in what are called IPEDs, provide data that we use on how much financial aid, what the list price was for tuition, and then we actually calculate the net, but it's simple math. But I have a very accomplished economist who actually does the math for me. Simple math. My doctoral dissertation was on John Milton, so I'm not a math.
Okay.
Okay. Did that answer your question,
Well,
Alice?
it does, but the grants, are those grants that they will get by doing a FAFSA, or are those grants that do they specifically apply for money? In another way?
The way it works is they do apply for money. We encourage every student, regardless of their income, to compete with FAFSA, because there are some scholarships, sometimes small and obscure ones, who require that, and you don't want to have to run back and do it. So there are certain deadlines. We promote those to the high school counselors, and so we ask everyone to apply. There are some grant programs, especially in private, that do not require you to be low income. Some do, and it just depends on the will of the donor.
Okay.
But it is still 70% of the grant funds our students receive is privately raised, either through the institution or they may have received national merit, for example, something like that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Dennis, can Ralph comment on the whole current issue of the deferment of student loans by, the Biden administration? He wanted to make community college free, but that didn't go through. And now he's debating whether to administratively void a lot of the student loan debt that exists in the country.
Speaking for myself only, not for the association, I think anything that will help students get out from under unreasonable debt burdens is certainly should be considered and probably fine-tuned. If we have a concern, it is that federal investment in that takes money which could otherwise go to grants, which also will keep down the level of loans. But it's limited, the Pell Grant program, for example, is not an entitlement. And so that means there has to be an appropriation. We're arguing for more for that, but if since loan forgiveness or remission is popular right now, our concern is that the federal investment will go to pay down loans, some of which loans may be held by people who are not low income, that in fact are upper income. And there will be less money than there could have been in the Pell Grant program. So it's a concern, but overarching, of course, we would like to do something to get loan levels down. I will say that I'm very proud to say that the default rate in Wisconsin, the lowest default rates are among private colleges for students. So I have concerns, but a general promotion for anything that helps students.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that the default rate amongst your private colleges is actually lower than the public universities in the state?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you don't let like these sort of for-profit schools that have been, with really high default rates, you don't let them in your organization, or?
That's absolutely true. They do not qualify. They must be a fully accredited private nonprofit institution, and then even then a member has to be voted on by 2/3 of the existing member colleges. So that's our effort to control quality. We feel, maybe you could sense me tensing up. It's one of the things that really bugs us when people think that we're a for-profit college, but it's certainly a valid question.
Mm-hmm.
A question.
Sure.
This $30,000 that you've been speaking of, and then the net to 4,000, is that tuition, or does that include tuition, room, and board, and the other costs of actually going to college?
It is tuition. There are programs that can be used for room and board, including grant programs, but the ones that we are administering here is purely used for tuition.
So the cost of going to one of the independent colleges is really much higher than the $4,000.
The room and board, as they report to the federal government, is roughly comparable as it would be in a public institution if you're staying on campus. So it is roughly the same. So there have been times when it's to the end of the figure, it's exactly the same, but they're roughly the same.
So what would when you're of college typically cost you, a student?
I don't think I can give that to you. I'll get you a figure and get it back to you.
Thank you.
Dennis, I'll send that through you if that's all right, or through the office.
Yeah, no, that'd be fine. If you send it to me, then I can send it out to our members.
Okay.
Good.
I went to high school with someone who was on here, but I don't see him anymore. So But
Oh.
you surely have a question.
I'm here, Rolf.
Okay, Larry. Larry was valedictorian the year I graduated from Montello High School.
Ah, how about that?
Well, thank you, Rolf.
Little plug there, yes. I'll be passing the hat in a little while.
Okay, any other questions? This has been a great session. We really appreciate your time, and it's been very educational, which is appropriate given the topic.
I've had
Yes.
it all. I love talking about these colleges and these issues. So thank you, all of you, for participating and for having me here.
Okay, well, thanks again. And we will resume presumably in the fall. Have a good summer, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Rolf.
Thank you.
Okay, bye now.